Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 103, and I am recording live on July 13th, 2017. Thank you to Robert Stanley, host of the Right to Reason podcast and man who lives in Texas on purpose. It's a great show, and he really challenges himself with the guests. Tonight, we will not experience a real Rocky Mountain High, although I do have proper beer representation. Skeptic Bret is one of the hosts of Atheists on High, which is a lot like Dearly Departed Atheist on Air, except higher. Welcome to the show. Got a Dragon's Milk representing a little pre-Game of Thrones week.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Zach.
Thanks for being on, and I apologize for the weird light issue. I still don't have my my big light on me.
Well, I'm glad you're apologizing. I'm really offended. So, yeah.
I know. You're easily offended, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes with the skeptic moniker.
Now, I actually have a couple of quotes. I joked to Bret that I listened to the latest Atheists on Air episode, and you had like 6 co-hosts, which might be a record. A modern day like Guinness might be talking to you about that. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I just couldn't, catch up where you were talking, so I couldn't get quotes. But then you did an interview, and I'm like, oh, look at that, just you. So I actually got a couple of quotes there. So whether these are out of context or not, leave it up to the listener. A Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist or a Muslim's best friend is an activist atheist. And the one thing I have in abundance is love for other people. Wow, I'm already feeling the love. We just got started. This is great.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising that you managed to pull a love quote out of me. I think that may be one of the only times I've ever said that on the air. But yeah, I appreciate the representation. No, I mean that quote, going back to that an atheist is everyone's best friend. When it comes to representation. Yeah, I've made that argument a number of times on air, and that it is really the people who are completely outside of the religion discussion, who aren't being considered religious, that need the most protection. And since they're the ones who care most about that, they do a great job of protecting everyone else. So that's kind of my view on that. I could be dead wrong, but that's where I stand on that question.
Yeah, it's not something that comes up often when you hear from kind of the right-wing people who are like, oh, we have to bring church back into the government, Jesus back into the government. They don't realize that you might be a Baptist and they decide, you know what, Catholicism. I would assume if America did pick a religion, it'd have to be like Mormonism or it has to be something like unique to America, but it's like maybe a crazy version of that and or Scientology and like Mormonism together. That would be pretty good, because then everybody would be equally like, oh, wow, you're right. Theocracy kind of sucks, but
right.
That's the way it goes. But we're not here to talk about just random stuff. We're here to talk about your show, the highest atheist podcast in America. At least that's the claim. And now we are skeptics, so we'll have to talk about the claim. But we're here to kind of first talk about the show. Now, did you start the show, Atheists on High?
I did, in a sense. So it was Jody, who is technically he's the MC for the night, is Jody. Although he's kind of hit and miss on different episodes lately, but he's the one who really kind of got it up off the ground. I had been interested in quite some time in doing either, podcast or radio or some sort of an audio format communication. And I had people pressuring me for quite some time to do it as well, because I'm very argumentative and I've got all my ducks in a row. And they said, you should be on the radio, or you should do a podcast. You should do something like that. And I had been listening to podcasts for a couple of years. And then I came across Jody. He's a member of the same local community that I am, Pikes Peak Atheists. That's the shirt I'm wearing there, Pikes Peak Atheists.
Represent.
So he's a member of that community, and he kind of reached out, just seeing if anybody would be interested at all. And I had already been thinking about it for a while. So I met with him one night at a pool hall and had a couple of beers. And the second that I came in, we hadn't met each other before. I came in and said, "Hey, I'm Brett," and he liked the voice. So as soon as he heard my voice, he said, "I don't care what you have to say, as long as it's not the stupidest shit I've ever heard in my life. You need to do a podcast." So that's kind of what happened there. And then there were a couple other people who had been thinking about it as well, that all kind of jumped on board. So there were the four of us originally, and then one person dropped off, another person came in, and then another person came in, and before you know it, we have a rotating cast of characters that are kind of all over the place.
So you were actually able to disprove the whole herding atheists, herding cats kind of thing, because you're able to get multiple atheists together in one place at one time.
Yeah. I mean, and imagine, like you said, the last episode that you listened to, there are 6 people around the table, which I think is definitely the limit. I don't prefer to do it that way. I prefer 4, maybe 5 tops. So 6 people in one podcast is definitely difficult, but I did manage to wrangle them all. So I'll take a little bit of credit there that we had that many atheists in one room talking about one subject without yelling at each other too much.
That's nice. So you mentioned some names. So who is do you have like your core AOH team, and then do you have people that come in and out over time?
Yeah, I would say the core now at this point is Jody, and then the Atheist Cowboy Rob, and Stephanie Jean, and then myself. So that would definitely be the core. Those are the 4 that are pretty much always there. Tim Robertson is mostly core, but he'll, if he just doesn't feel like doing it for the night, he'll decide not to do it. I get that, but he's quickly becoming core as well. So I don't know. I probably here within the next couple of months, you could easily say that there are 5 solid members of Atheists on High.
Now, what would you say would be like your elevator pitch for the show for people who haven't heard it before?
Oh, see, that's a little difficult to wrap up. Honestly, I mean, the best
time, you can
yeah,
talk once a week, so feel free,
Yeah, and this is kind of an issue. I've tried to figure out different ways to maybe put together an ad spot that I can send out to other podcasts. We could just plug the show easily, and it's a little difficult to explain. I would say probably the best way to put it is, our show is 100% unscripted. It's not even well researched. We will figure out what we're talking about 5 minutes before we hit the air, and we run every episode live. It goes out in 3 segments. And what you get to see while the show is going is all of these different ideas kind of hit the floor all at the same time, and then try to figure out what's bunk and what makes sense. And we kind of piece it all together around the table. So as opposed to a lot of other podcasts, maybe you would go to them and they would say, here's the deal and this is our opinion on it. Done. Next question. With us, you kind of get to see all those different ideas unfurl all at the same time and see what washes out.
Yeah, that's a fine line with podcasts. I'm hearing a little echo all of a sudden.
I mean, you can say it's a bad idea if you want. You're probably right.
Well, you can tell on a podcast whether someone's like reading a script. As good as this kind of Scathing Atheist crew is, occasionally you go, oh, they wrote that thing out way in advance.
Oh, sure.
And when you do live, you get the positivity of just something pulled out of your ass that's really great, and then something that's pulled out of your ass you wish had stayed there. So you get that too, and I think that's needed. It's like if you're in there and you just, all right, I'm gonna say what's on the top of my head. It's like, well, okay, we're gonna find out, and that I don't know. I think the quality. It's like you may not be in the middle, but you're all over the place. But some of the highs are better than the lows, because the lows you expect that, right? But when you get the highs, you're like, oh, look at me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, being very much an improv show. I mean, it's all off the cuff. Like you were saying, nothing is scripted, nothing's planned. There are no pre-written jokes. It all really just, we're flying by the seat of our pants, and that definitely does make the really great moments feel amazing when they do happen. That also, unfortunately, means that the listeners don't realize that, because most people that listen to our show don't realize that there's no planning at all, that goes into the show. We know it, so we feel great when something amazing happens, but the listeners have no way of knowing that.
So where do you record, and do you have a set time?
Yeah, we record at High Street Studios. which is actually not on High Street anymore. And we go live every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Mountain Time. So that's 9 o'clock on the East Coast and 6 o'clock if you're on the West Coast. We do so we do the live show, and then we also put out a podcast version of every show as well, which gets kind of chopped up and edited. And then if you're a patron, you get everything that happened on the live show plus what happened in between video feeds that even the live viewers don't get to see. So we do 3 different versions of the show.
So where do people find you live? Like, where are you posting? Can people get on and basically, harass you while you're doing it?
Yes, absolutely they can. They frequently do harass us, and we love our listeners for doing that. We do every show on Facebook Live, which we have found to be a really great venue that's easily shared and really well connected. So if you just go to facebook.com/atheists on high and give us a like and a follow, you will get the notifications as soon as we go on the air, and you will be able to chirp at us throughout the show. And if you say something vile enough or important enough, you'll get a mention, and we will probably talk about it.
Well, that sounds good.
Preferably vile enough. Make it disgusting.
I need to figure out how to do Facebook Live from the Zachrilege Cast page, because occasionally Zachrilege Cast sort of thoughts are there, and I don't want to put them on my normal page. But I've only done that way. I'm sure you can show me the secrets. Show me your secrets.
Yeah, well, I mean, as long as you've got what you probably have. You probably have OBS on your computer, I would imagine, if you're running some sort of open source video software. If you have OBS, that's a pretty easy plug-in. You can just, just cut and paste your key and put it in and just stream right to Facebook. You can probably simulcast. I'm not 100% sure how that works out. I know the way that we're set up right now with when we go live with our show, we stream to Facebook with absolutely no problems. And then trying to get onto the show with you on Google Hangouts was actually, it wasn't compatible with the studio at all. So I'm on an old Asus laptop right now from probably 1975. And so that's how I had to get connected here. So it seems to me like there's a little bit of a wall there between Google Hangouts, Facebook Live, and for some reason they're not really compatible.
I don't know. I'd consider myself one of the most technically inept people in atheist podcasting. If I'm on there's a Facebook page that talks about atheist podcasting, and they start talking about all the audio stuff they do, I'm like, I record, I have a microphone. That's it. I do Google Hangouts because it's easy, and I just record, and there it is. That's my thing.
Yeah,
and you said OBS. I'm like, is that some kind of weight loss program? I don't even know.
Yeah, so it's just open source software. It's an easy download. You can stream your video through that. It's got some studio options. They get really easy to use. If you just download it, it's all really intuitive, a nice user interface on it. Again, I'm also not really the tech guy around here either. That would be Jody, who really understands how to put together a show. So everything that we have, our mixer and our recording equipment and our microphones and our stands, all that stuff, that's all Jody's doing. So I don't know what he's got going on. I know it works. I know it's kind of magical, but I don't know exactly how he does it.
That's better when someone's like, do your magic, and then you show up, and I'm like, all right, great, that's perfect.
Yeah, that'll work for me. And then the magic that I have to do is after all of that happens and we go live, I have to take the raw audio, and put together a podcast. So that's where I work my magic. Because at least it's not buttons and switches. I don't want to deal with that. So instead what I do is just take the raw audio and take it up to my editing computer and try to make it sound good, which unfortunately did not work with the last episode. The one that you listened to probably didn't sound that great.
I'm like the least hard on audio guy there is. I'm like, that sounds fine. I don't know.
It'll work. As long as it's audible. I mean, I guess it does count. I think after a while, once you've been in podcasting for a little while and you're trying to put out a really great sounding product, I think you're just unnecessarily harsh on yourself. That there have been shows that I put out that just sound really clean the whole way through and great cuts and everything works out perfectly. So anytime that it's below that level, I'm pretty hard on myself.
Well, I guess once you reach a certain level of quality, you're like, come on, at least can I get that bar? And you can't always guarantee that bar is going to happen.
Yeah, just stay there. Hopefully, just stay at that bar wherever I say. I don't need to go above it. I just want to reach that one point.
I want my cats to be able to jump over my bar. But you do stories. You talk, at least the episode I listened to. Well, I listened to a couple of them. You talked about stories. So how do you all just get in a room and go, hey, I want to talk about this, that, or you just go online and start Googling and whatever you come up with, you're like, all right, let's do it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like any podcasters, of course, we have our private group where we share ideas and we go back and forth about those. And usually that doesn't work out very well at all. we'll put all of those ideas out, for a week, and we'll share different stories and say, I want to talk about, this thing or that thing, whatever it is. And then right before we go live, we'll throw it all out the window and somebody will say, what's really on my mind right now is this story. And then we say, okay, going live. And we just go with that. So whoever it is that had the idea for the story is usually the one who opens it. So that's one good way to keep track of whose fault it is. If a show doesn't go well, it's whoever opened up the story, it was their idea.
Nice. So you mentioned segments. Do you say segment A, B, C, or you just kind of like, all right, after however many minutes, we're just taking a break, and I hope we get there?
Yeah, we usually hit it somewhere around about the 15-minute mark is the intro, and that's just kind of a round table. We go around and we'll talk a little bit about everybody's life, whatever's happened in the past week. How are you? What's on your mind? And we'll dedicate about 15 minutes to that, and then we'll shut off and we'll step out on the back deck or whatever it is and discuss that opening segment, whether or not we want to go with the story we've already discussed a little bit, or if there's something brand new that just hit the news, we'll go ahead and cover that. And that's kind of one of the perks of doing a live show is that, if you listen to it in the podcast, you're definitely going to get old news. But if you're watching it live and something hits the news feed 10 minutes before we do a segment, we're going to be covering it before anybody else does. Whether for better or for worse, we're going to be covering it. We could easily be way off the mark and be wrong about everything, but at least we're already out there, and we may as well talk about it if it just came through. And we've had a couple of times that's happened, for sure.
So you find the benefits to every method of recording. Now I'm going to do my live read one since we're about 20 minutes in, and I am doing back-to-back shifts tonight. Lots of fun, and I still have beer after this, so don't you worry, y'all. So can I convince you to go to a secular conference that I've already told you 10 times and you've ignored me to date? Well, let's give it a go. Secular is defined as denoting attitudes, activities, or other things that have no religious or spiritual basis. There will be no spiritualism, but there will be spirits. That's right. When atheist podcasts gather, as will be the case next weekend in Chattanooga, beer will flow. Consider that. Consider hanging out with your current and future best friends, listening to some great voices like Mandisa Thomas, and a podcaster panel featuring me, like a pop song featuring a tambourine solo. SecularSaturday.com, $30 in advance, including lunch. Get on it, people. We are preparing ourselves next weekend. SecularSaturday.com. You'll find all the stuff in the notes. We're still talking on Atheists on High. So do you encourage recording the show and or listening while high?
While high, especially. I mean, that's probably the only way that we make any sense is if you're stoned out of your mind or so drunk you can't hear us anymore. So I would recommend both if you're a listener. If you're on the show, I highly recommend drinking throughout the show. Otherwise, you're not going to be on the same level as the rest of the people around the table. That is a regular practice around here. Unfortunately, that means that we've had times where people are so sloshed by the end of the show that it just stops making sense altogether. But you know what? The way that I see it, that's what people do when they're having great conversations. You've had those great conversations with a buddy, out in the driveway or in the back of a pickup truck, or, well, I don't know, whichever, or, you know, hanging out in the backyard, whatever it is. And the conversation gets really intense and it gets really interesting, although you're clearly both drunk, you know, so you're kind of slurring your words and it's kind of hard to put it together. But the conversation's got a lot of heat to it. And so I encourage that. And Atheists on High is no different. I mean, we're not, you know, we're not sitting up on some, you know, some pillars of wisdom and, you know, just drinking water throughout the show and trying to keep it held together. I mean, if it deteriorates, it does. But also, you know, along with a couple of drinks, your inhibitions go out the window and you can wind up with some really great material that way. So that's what I encourage around the table and for our listeners as well.
Well, for me, it's like the later the show is and the more people are on the show, the more I'm probably going to drink.
So we probably got you completely sloshed that last episode then. It had 6 people all talking at the same time. Did you just down an entire handle of whiskey, or how did you deal with that? Tell me about it, Zach.
Well, unfortunately, I probably listened to part of it while driving either from or to work. So, you know, there's a limit to how much you can. I was more thinking of the shows I've been guests on, like doing Utah Outcast, where they were started recording at like midnight my time on like a Saturday. Like, oh, yeah. I got to like watch the amount of I had to drink before the show starts and make sure that I run out of things and I have no way to get more, because that is always a problem. When there's more stuff available and you're like, yeah, let's go. And you're like, oh, boy. But it gets fun. And I think, yeah, I think it's a good – we'll keep on the – well, we won't keep on the getting high part. We'll keep on the drinking part because it's all kind of the same. It's all legal where you are. Did you actually challenge the Waiting for Eth podcast to an Ark Park-related drinking contest?
We have not officially. I hear that rumor's kind of floating around. I don't know exactly where it started, but I've been hearing a little bit about that. We have a little bit of a battle going on with the Waiting for Wrath podcast already. That being that it turns out we are not the highest atheist podcast, and they called us out publicly for it. So if anybody listens to Atheists on High, you will hear that the elevation is 6,206 feet. Now, that is not accurate anymore because we moved the studio to my home, which is 6,895 feet, which is even higher. We're at almost 7,000 feet at my house. And I guess the people from Waiting for Wrath are at 7,500 feet or 76, somewhere around there. So we have been challenged, and I think it was the Atheist Cowboy Rob that made the argument that where they record from is actually built on about 1,000 feet of sheep shit. And so that's not an accurate representation of their actual altitude. So we've had a little bit of a battle back and forth. But yeah, I think in the spirit of true skepticism, I'm going to have to change the intro for the show and say that it makes us one of the highest atheist podcasts.
Well, you can't just like go to there's like a hill down the road. It's an extra 1,100 feet. Let's go record live outside. Let's go in nature. That'll make it even better.
Yeah, I've actually proposed that maybe we should just go to the top of Pikes Peak. So we're in Colorado Springs, and Pikes Peak, you know, America's mountain, is I believe 14,109 feet, 119 feet, whatever it is. And if we go record a single episode from the top of Pikes Peak, then we can certainly hold claim to being the highest atheist podcast. So I think that's on the docket coming soon, that we're going to have to do a show from the top of the mountain.
I would guess, I mean, the Guinness Book of World Records doesn't hold the weight it used to, but there has to be some kind of like height record. Has someone done a podcast from like the International Space Station? That might be the way to do it. Although that might not technically count because, you know,
well, maybe
outside the atmosphere.
Yeah. What was the what was that astronaut's name? You're going to have to help me out with this. That did the Bowie tribute from the International Space Station.
Really?
When Bowie passed, and he did a David Bowie cover with his acoustic guitar. Yeah. From the International Space Station. So, I mean, if you could call that a podcast, I don't know. I think it's streamed. It was live streaming. But if you can find a way to manipulate that and say that it's a cast of some sort, then he certainly holds the record. I don't think anyone's done any better than that.
Yeah, it'd be tough to beat, but I would like it. I think it's the University of Tennessee, University of Michigan in college football, where they like go back and forth as to who has the biggest capacity. So it'd just be cool if you and Waiting for Wrath would just like, all right, we stood on this ladder. We're like 3 feet higher now.
You did not just throw out the Michigan Tennessee question, did you?
What, regarding just capacity in the stands?
Yeah, regarding capacity, yeah. Well, I'm originally a Michigan guy. I was born and raised down the interstate from Detroit, and yeah, so I'm pretty Michigan all the way, and I don't think there's a debate there. Or are the Tennessee people saying they've got bigger capacity? Is that what's going on?
So I happen to get a Michigan beer. It's not Michigan beer is great. The Salvador Skeptics and Paleo Radio are also they're Michigan folks, and it's not hard for me to have like a Founders or a New Holland beer. No, I swear it was like for a few years, Michigan and Tennessee, they would like add 2,000 seats and they would be the #1 capacity and go back and forth. I mean, I was at a game at Tennessee with 20,000 empty seats and there are 90,000 people there, which was weird.
Right.
But it's close. I don't know what it is now. It is what it is.
Yeah, whichever.
People get really serious about it.
I've actually never even heard of that before. I didn't know that Tennessee was trying to make claim that they had a bigger seating capacity than the Big House. So now that I'm aware of that, I'm going to have to start.
The Big House. It's got the name. Come on.
Yeah, come on. We've already got it. Yeah, now that I know that, I'm going to have to start harassing people online. I had no idea, so I'm going to have to go to TennesseeHasABiggerStadium.com and just start insulting people, I guess.
I don't know if that works, harassing people online. I've never heard of that. That might be a new thing.
There's this guy Eli Bosnick. I've seen him doing it. I'm kind of following in his footsteps. It's interesting. It's fun to watch.
Oh, if only he started it, that would be great.
Oh man. Maybe I'll shoot him a message and see if he'll go for it.
Well, you mentioned it. You were talking about in your last show the Ark Park, and I actually made some kind of joke because there was the protest that just happened last weekend. There's a pretty good Cincinnati concentration. A few of those people will be in Chattanooga next weekend. Just hint, hint. But they were at the Ken Ham Ark Park in middle of nowhere, Kentucky, protesting it, and it was actually the 1-year anniversary, so it wasn't just a random thing. So what are your thoughts on the park and protests and all this weird, is it a ministry, isn't it a ministry, oh wait, are we taxing, what's the most money? This is clearly a very biblical thing. Make the most money out of the suckers as you can before they finally catch you.
Well, yeah, I agree with you on that. I would say well, the first thing I have to say about the Ark Park is I'm surprised it's made it the first year. I really expected just such a massive flop that they would close their doors within about 9 months. And I mean, it looks like they're well on their way to that. I think Answers in Genesis just keeps on pumping money into that behemoth non-boat, trying to keep it not afloat. And as far as how they've gotten away with it, I mean, like Answers in Genesis has attorneys. They know what they're doing. The whole thing is funded through a nonprofit, but the boat itself is not a nonprofit. So they're allowed to get money from the nonprofit just as a donation, and therefore they can discriminate against, against potential hirees and all of the other things that come along with common practice in hiring and firing law and all of that labor law. So, I don't know. It's just another scam from Ken Ham. We've seen him do this before, and I think probably the Ark Park had to happen for him because the Creation Museum has been dropping in attendance since it opened. And I mean, there's really just no way around that. I think we've talked about it on the show before, is that the difference between what Ken Ham is doing with his with his Creation Museum and with the Ark Park is you set it up once and then it's just hands off. What else are you going to add? There's no new information. You never learn anything with creationism or with biblical stories. Nothing ever changes. So he builds it once and he appeals to a certain demographic. I'll give him that. It's really impressive that he has the demographic that he does. But if they go twice, maybe 3 times, who's going back? There's nothing new to see. So he just keeps on building these museums and these attractions that have limited reach at best. And then after that, there are no return customers. So he had to build the ark. That's the best way that I can put it. If he didn't build it, everything was falling apart pretty rapidly.
Yeah, a yearish ago, I had Jenica Crail on to talk about, because she was at the original protest, and the talk was about how empty the parking. There's this giant parking lot they made for this life size, Noah's Ark, and then the best. I mean, there's so many great parts about the Ark Park, but one of the best parts is all of the wives. They had to make up the names because they weren't in the Bible, like the names of the wives of like the sons. So they made them up like based on Disney characters. And
yeah, I think that was about right.
You're making the stuff come because it's not there. So I don't know why you're pretending it's such an authoritative thing. But the fact that it's still there. What was the latest controversy? Like Ken Ham didn't want to pay some kind of fee that they usually charge parks. That's actually like a good thing for the state, but not a good thing for people making money.
Oh, I don't know. That's actually news to me. The only bit that I've been keeping up with is that he's blaming atheists for the for the Ark Park failing. That was the latest that I kept up with it. Honestly, Ken Ham kind of wears me out. It's kind of fun to look at it and just kind of laugh at him. It's that sad uncle that shows up to the barbecue late that nobody really likes. That's kind of how I treat Ken Ham anymore. I know that he is having some issues with the town that the Ark is built in, and that I believe it was the mayor who had come out and said, all these promises that were made by Ken Ham about, the growth of business in the area and, new commerce coming in and all the crowds coming in that would be kind of a boon to the local economy, that the mayor of that town had come out publicly and said, we haven't seen any of that. I know that it cost us money to do this, and we're not seeing anything in return. So I'm sure that that's linked somehow to whatever it is that Ken Ham is trying to refuse to pay. I'm just not 100% sure. Unless I talk to Andrew Torres, I'm sure he would know.
I guess it's a safety fee. Like they put 75 cents on every ticket and they charge them, and it's basically for safety, for fire trucks and that sort of thing. And he's actually going to sue over that. Like they're switching now. They're like, oh, now we're a ministry again. I think actually technically it was like the gift shop was supposed to be like, that's the for-profit part. The rest is a ministry. It's like,
oh, geez.
Or wherever they take the tickets, that's the for-profit part.
I mean, where they take the tickets, the for-profit
church. And by the way, it's thunder and lightning outside, so there's a good chance this blows up and it's all gone. But I think we're gonna stick around. I got that weird, I'm telling like a ghost story kind of light going on. I don't know if it adds or detracts from the show.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we've had a couple of storms roll through here today too. We had some hail and some thunder and lightning and everything earlier, but I think it's passed. So with any luck, we'll hold up on both ends. But yeah, I mean, as far as the protests go, I think it was worth doing right when Ken opened up the Ark Park, to get out there and just make sure there are a lot of people that are just pretty disgusted by this idea and the way that he manipulated the law and found his way into getting, some sort of a handout from the state to build this atrocity. I think that was worth it. Honestly, at the 1 year point with how badly it's failing, I don't think we needed to be there. I mean, it's fun. It's always fun rubbing it in Ken Ham's face. No matter what it is, it's fun rubbing it in his face. So I get that. I think, what was it? Jenica Crail, I think you had mentioned, was there and gave a little talk. And that's great. It's just, I don't see that we really need to be there anymore. I think we've already done our job. Ken Ham knows that the atheists failed the Ark Park for him. So we can move on to the next target.
We're an easy kind of boogeyman for a lot of people. We've talked about your show, but we haven't really talked about you. So what's your own like personal religious background?
Boy, it's a nightmare. I can say that much. So, well, like I said, I was raised in Michigan, and so, people think of Michigan as being mostly a blue state, and that just is not the case. I don't know how it ever got that reputation. And especially after what happened this last major election with Michigan going for Trump. you know, there's a lot of backward thinking around there, and there's a lot of church culture. So I was raised in a what I would call a Baptist church. I'm sure if you ever listened to Atheists on Air, back when Cash was doing the show, he mentioned Baptist quite a bit. And that is just a firebrand Baptist Pentecostal kind of through the roof insane level of belief. My mom and dad, they were both products of the Jesus movement coming out of the 70s. And we're really big into the satanic panic. I don't know how many of your listeners are aware of the satanic panic or what that looked like, but you know, that happened in the late 70s through actually, honestly, all the way through the early 90s, the satanic panic.
Great episode of The Thinking Atheist talking about it, because he was kind of in the age range where
yes,
he was a big time Christian when that was happening. I feel like it was the 80s was the peak, but I don't necessarily think it's ended.
Yeah, I don't know.
Around.
Yeah, I don't know that it's 100% ended yet, but I mean, it's definitely not what it was. You know, I was raised kind of in the middle of the hype about it. And yeah, and Seth Andrews, the way that he talked about it, and I've been to a couple of conferences before and talked to him in person about it. He'll just go on forever if you want to talk to him about the satanic panic. But yeah, so I was a product of that, and you know, my family has a history of mental illness, especially for the females. That seems to be the case on my mother's side. And so there's this kind of intersection between mental illness and, you know, insane zealot levels of belief that kind of goes together with Baptist culture that created for a really toxic environment for me as a kid. But coming out of that, I would say that it just took me a little while to kind of snap out of it. You know, I was a 6,000-year-old Earth believer, and, you know, a real 7-day creation, and that evolution is a satanic lie, and that there's hidden symbolism and everything. And yeah, I mean, really, like I was raised in fear of 666 and the mark of the beast, and look out for barcodes, and credit cards are how the devil's going to get in you. And I was raised in the middle of all of that, along with a mentally ill mother who didn't know she was mentally ill, or at least refused to admit it, and was just constantly seeking prayer and intervention from church leaders to make her well. So you can imagine what kind of a nightmare environment that looks like. I don't know how many of your listeners really connect with that, but I mean, there's still times that I think back on the way that I was raised and those experiences and just wonder how the hell I even got out, to be honest with you.
Ooh, we might have to hit on that, but I got to do my second live read. We're about the 40-minute point. So now, if you're listening to this show on Thursday night or Friday morning and happen to be in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, because who isn't, you really should go check out the live 100th episode spectacular for Inciting Incident, starring Marissa Alexa McCool. Most likely you're either super cool and are going or in that podcast throng attending. Tons of great people will be there. Or you're sad like me and stuck in Georgia. Congratulations on 100 episodes, Marissa. You are an inspiration. I've been there, but you've been there with way more listeners, and just a great story. And glad that Chris Cluey, you know, I got the football thing, you know, got a punter, NFL punter there. It's going to be fun. It's going to be good. Carlisle, how much booze they have, they need to like step it up for that weekend, because it's going to be strong. But what was the journey like for you getting out?
Really, really, really messy. I wish I had done it the right way, and I didn't. Well, so I was raised in such a protected environment. I was raised in a church bubble that as soon as I had a chance to get away from the house, I did what they say that kids do when they get out of a bubble environment. I went downhill rapidly. Went through a lot of years of major drug abuse, and some of these are really extended stories, but you know, found myself nearly dead a couple of times as well, and kind of dug my way out of that, all the while somehow convinced that I still believed in God, although I didn't know in what capacity. And then my atheism was kind of slowly sneaking up on me, mostly starting with 9/11. which I think a lot of atheists can relate to that. They can look back at 9/11 and say that was kind of the moment where a lot of things started to click. You started to see the problem of religious belief, and the United States response to it was just more religion in response. And I think it was the things that unfurled over those couple of days. Are you there?
Yeah, I just occasionally mute when I burp and things. So.
Oh. So those couple of things, those couple of days after 9/11 and the way that it all kind of rolled out really got me questioning. And I kind of just sat on that for years. I didn't do a lot with it, but I think it was just slowly stewing in the background. And I remember there was one day, it was probably about, I don't know, probably about 7 years ago, that I did realize that I didn't believe anymore. And I didn't know what the right word was. I didn't realize that atheist was a thing that I could be. And I just kind of hid it, honestly, for a lot of years. I wouldn't say anything to family. I wouldn't say anything to friends. And it was actually the podcasting community that opened that door for me. It was people like Seth Andrews and shows like The Atheist Experience, listening to Matt Dillahunty. I think a lot of us had similar journeys there, along with just being able, honestly, just to go to YouTube and listen to Christopher Hitchens talk and listen to his refutations, hear those ideas really being fleshed out in public in a way that a lot of us had never heard before. And it just built up after a while, and I got my confidence. And when I did finally really come out as an atheist, I did it the wrong way. I came out very, very angry. And I hurt a lot of people that I love. I did. And what's really sad about that is that no matter how many times now I've tried to go back and apologize for having hurt them the way that I did, they can't seem to let it go. And that's not 100% on them. A lot of that is on me, because I definitely hurt a lot of people. If I had never done that in the first place, I wouldn't have much to apologize for. So I don't know if anybody's going to walk away with anything out of this conversation. I would just encourage you, if you are not out yet as an atheist, don't do it until you can do it the right way. If you can be kind, if you can be gracious, because sometimes you can't take back the damage that you've done.
Well, I'm wondering with some people, is it possible to do it a quote unquote right way? Because a lot of people, when you say you're like leaving religion, they take it as a personal attack, when it's not, because you can't say anything negative about the religion because it's such an important part of who they are that they can't see that there's a way to kind of separate the two. I mean, I don't know. That's a tough thing to be tough on yourself about, because I understand being angry. I never was religious, but when I kind of like, wait, I'm an atheist, and wait, this is ridiculous. So it's hard not to just come out both barrels and go, what are you guys doing? But I understand that people get upset and get emotional about it. And it's a tough one.
Yeah, I guess what I mean by the right way isn't, so Zach, like you said, you're not wrong. There's no nice way to put it. That's just all there is to it, right? When you tell someone, I reject what it is that you think is the most important thing in the world. There's no nice way to say that. There's no nice way to say, I think that that's a delusional way of thinking, so I'm not going to do it. There's no nice way to do that. But you don't have to be a dick about it. And that's what I was. I really think that's the best way that I could put it. By the right way, I don't mean, make them comfortable with it, because they're not going to be. A lot of people aren't going to be comfortable with it. What I mean is, you don't have to burn bridges. You don't have to insult people's intellect. You don't have to hurt the ones intentionally that you love. And those are unfortunately some of the things that I did. I made enemies out of my family, and I treated them like enemies. And I really, really wish that I hadn't. There's no way to go back and take that back.
So you're saying you've gotten over the angry phase at this point?
I would say for the most part. I mean, as well as any other atheist knows, there are things that religion does that just gets us fired up. There are those permanent atheist buttons that they're gonna, no matter how long you've been an atheist, no matter how comfortable you are, they're going to find a way to push that atheist button where no matter how chill of an atheist you are, there's always that one thing that fires you up. You know, whether it's faith healers killing their kids, or the systematic oppression of women and other minority groups, or the raping of children by the Catholic Church, whatever it is. There are things that we just, no matter how long it's been, that's still going to be a button for atheists, and they're going to get angry. They'll get red in the face.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to breathe and figure out a way. The things that don't bother normal people, you go, yeah.
Yeah. I said like the small things. I mean, there's still things that annoy me. You know, when I hear family members who were upset with the Noah movie. You remember that whatever it was that came out with who was that directed that? The atheist producer. What's his name? But anyway,
Russell Crowe was in it.
Yeah, so that Noah movie came out, and there's a family member on my wife's side of the family that was really upset with it because it wasn't accurate to the true story. And I had the hardest time not going off on him about how ridiculous it is to even think that could possibly be a true story. Because this is a man in his 30s. I mean, who's in their 30s and thinks that the story of Noah's Ark was actually a real event? Those things they frustrate me, but I try to let them go as much as possible. Now, if instead, if one of his kids was sick and he decided to pray over them instead of taking them to the doctor and they died, I would be justifiably enraged by that, I would say. I would probably try to press charges.
Yeah, there are other things where you're like, okay, I can bite my tongue. The other ones go, wow, there's actual real harm being done to people.
Yeah.
Now I listened to 2 episodes of your show, so I haven't totally binge listened yet. I got a long way to go to be caught up. One episode was, the 6 co-host experience, and then other episode I listened to is when you talked to a woman running for Congress in Colorado. So what was it like? How did you set that up to talk to, I believe her name is Betty Field, who's running for, is it House of Representatives in Colorado? Is that correct? Or is it?
Yes. She's running for the House. That was actually that was kind of incidental. It wasn't intended. Uh-oh, you killed your beer. Here, I need a little bit of a refill. I got a little bit more of this going on here.
So you got the bomber. That's a smart car right there, because it's going to be tough to run through.
Well, it's not bad. I think it's only $6 for this one. What is this? How many ounces they got in this damn thing? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, Betty Field. I kind of stumbled across her on social media. Somebody else had liked her page, and I said, "Oh, it's somebody running against Doug Lamborn, who has held the House seat for Colorado's 5th district for, I think he's on 8 or 9 years now that he's been there, and that's long enough." So, so I kind of got in touch with her, and we were chatting back and forth. And I said, "Well, hey, I'm on your side. You're running as a Democrat. You're liberally minded. You're progressive. So I'm on your side. And hey, just to let you know, I do a podcast. So if you're looking for an outlet for an interview or anything, just let me know." And she jumped on that pretty quick, obviously, because it's free exposure. And so we did that episode, and then within about a week and a half after that, we had been talking a little bit back and forth, just online. And what happened incidentally with that is that she asked me to be part of her campaign staff, to where now I am a political strategist. So I'm developing policy and helping her work out through debate responses and speeches and how to say things, and also how to reach out through the media. So I all of a sudden found myself smack in the middle of a political campaign recently, which, we encourage that a lot on Atheists on High. If you kind of go back to previous episodes, we're constantly pressing people to get involved, especially in more local politics, but at whatever level you can. Get involved, be a part of something, and that's how we really start making changes in this country. So just trying to live what I preach.
Well, that's one positive thing that's come out of the whole Donald Trump situation, is that there are some people who have gotten mad to the point where they got involved. Like Arn Ra's running in Texas in a very
Yeah.
red district, which I hear the district, you know, you were talking about in Colorado is probably pretty red. The one I live in Georgia's pretty red. They spent a ton of money, ended up losing by like 2%, which was very sad. But Adam Collins, Atheist, is running for like city council in Cincinnati. And there are a few other people scattered around the country who are running, not necessarily open atheists, but way more. I mean, that was the thing about talking to Betty Field. It was like, yeah, I work for you, and you people tell me what I do, instead of like, I am smarter than you. I'm going to come up with this policy, and I'm going to talk to my father and God and all that, and it's going to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And just make people angry about generic crap that doesn't exist, that still seems to work these days. I mean, the attack ads on the guy in Georgia were just like, it wasn't even connected. It's like, oh, people broke windows on Inauguration Day. I'm like, what does that have to do with the guy running for office in our state?
He sent them out.
Nancy Pelosi, she's in California. Why do you? You're adults. You shouldn't have boogeymen anymore. But that happens, and both sides try it. And instead of maybe the Democratic try to reach for the middle way, it's almost like more people who are kind of like Bernie. I don't know. It's like just having a normal human being running for office was refreshing, just to hear someone who didn't necessarily have the answers. And I forget what her job was, but she said she was like running for office and she was actually on Medicare. I'm like, well, that's a difference compared to most of the people running for office these days.
Yeah, I think we've actually been checking around, and I think that she is we haven't found anyone else yet anyway, that she is the first person ever to run for public office that announced their candidacy while still on Medicare. I think that is a first. And, you know, I mean, that honestly gives her kind of a leg up with a lot of people, you know, that she understands the daily struggle in a way that so many other people, you know, or so many other candidates do not. I mean, just the other night we were out setting up an event, a fundraising event, and we went to a little local dive bar here, and that's where we were setting up a campaign fundraiser at a dive bar. And we went into this little hole in the wall place, and she talked to 2 Trump supporters over the course of that night, who were pretty upset with what's going on with Trump, even though they voted for him. And they both absolutely swore that they're voting for Betty Field. I mean, they were so convinced that, yeah, actually the Republican answer hasn't been the answer, and it never has been, and it probably never will be. And so, I mean, it's that kind of outreach, I think, with political candidates, those of us who are really passionate now, like you said, that we were kind of spurred on by the Trump victory, that actually has me more confident than a lot of people that in 2018 we're going to see a pretty big swing in favor of blue.
But in a way, I almost think it needs to be beyond, like, almost the Democratic Party and Republican Party need to be pushed aside for something else, that because there's so much. I mean, one of the keys was Betty mentioned that it wasn't taking any corporate money, and that's something that I think Bernie Sanders did.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's so much like anonymous corporate money, and it's basically, we'll give you money, but when you get in office, you're going to be doing stuff for us. And that's, if you're just an individual person, like voting for a candidate, that has to make you feel like there's no point. I shouldn't even go, because it doesn't matter who I vote for. The person's got money behind them, and therefore they're going to do what the big wigs want them to do.
Yeah. I mean, and I understand that a lot of people feel that way. But again, I mean, also on Atheists on High, we've made the argument before, and actually, I think Jody has put it really well before, that the bottom line is we do have a 2-party system. And as much as we wish that wasn't the case, you know, they have everything. You know, the Republicans and the Democrats, they have, like, if you put it into a sports analogy, they have the stadiums, they have the uniforms, they have the cheerleaders, they have the advertising, they have all the players. So if you want to start changing the game, you've got to get into one of those stadiums and then start a side project. And so that's why as much as I'm upset with what's going on with the Democratic Party, That's why I still pretty consistently stay within the Democratic Party, because if anything is going to change, it's going to happen from the inside. I don't think it's going to happen from the outside.
Yeah, at this point, I'm with you. Now, unfortunately, because I'm having a good time, this has been fun. Sadly, I have another show to do in a couple minutes. Going for 2 is my football show. But so tell everybody where they can find you online, where they can find Atheists on Air, what you got going on.
Yeah, you can find myself. That's Skeptic Bret on Facebook, and you can find me on Twitter. You can find Atheists on High on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Atheists on High. Same for Twitter at Atheists on High or atheistsonhigh.com. And if you like what you hear, find us patreon.com/Atheists on High and throw us a buck an episode. And I think I've actually promised recently to have every hair on my body tweezed individually if we hit our $500 episode mark. So if you want to see some really horrendous
that's a video for
that's video that
true believers.
Yeah, if we hit 500 patron dollars per episode, I will have the hairs on my body tweezed off head to toe. So that's quite the sacrifice. So, but yeah, definitely check us out. It's easy to find the podcast in the podcatcher app that you use. If you use Stitcher, iTunes, or anything else that you work with, just put in Atheists on High. There is only one Atheist on High. Any search will only bring up us. So pretty easy to find.
And Jeannie, my one listener who's on live, says, "I'll bring the tweezers." Uh-oh.
Oh no. Okay.
You know, there's a positive and there's a negative to the whole thing.
Oh, Jeannie, you're gonna have to push Rob out of the way. I think he's kind of excited to get up between my ass cheeks with a pair of tweezers. He was really excited about it the other night. So
you're gonna need like a team of people with tweezers.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty hairy. This might be a problem. I wish I hadn't offered it up, but I've already promised the listeners that that's what we're going to do. So I'm gonna have to do that.
You got to stick with your promises.
Yeah.
So if you want to support this show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Teode, Marissa, go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, ZACHRILEGE. Follow me on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you, Skeptic Bret, again for being on tonight. For listeners, stay safe. If you need the chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and you feel alone, you're not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectedness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. Love all y'all, and good night.